It's time for another retro shelf video and unboxing a new parcel from Unbound. Rather strangely, the postage label was put over the tear strip here, which made it harder to get into, but let's open it up, take the invoice out, and then we can have a look at the book inside, which I'm going to reveal is Dice Men, Iain Livingstone with Steve Jackson, the origin story of Games Workshop. So this was funded through Unbound Publishing. Games Workshop, Warhammer, White Dwarf, Citadel Miniatures and Fighting Fantasy are names which trigger powerful memories for millions of people around the world. The cultural impact of Games Workshop and Fighting Fantasy has been remarkable. But how did it all begin? Since starting out in 1975 as a part-time mail-order business in a modest third-floor flat in West London, Games Workshop has grown from its humble beginnings to become a FTSE 250 company listed on the London Stock Exchange. From distributing Dungeons & Dragons to living in the back of a van, to opening Games Workshop stores, to creating Fighting Fantasy, to launching Warhammer, co-founders Iain Livingstone and Steve Jackson tell their remarkable story for the first time. Dice Men is the fascinating, never-before-told story of an iconic company which changed the world of tabletop gaming forever. It's an insight into the rollercoaster first years of Games Workshop and the birth of an industry. And of course there's the British Steve Jackson and the American Steve Jackson, who also happens to be in role-playing games and board games. And as we can see, this is a signed edition. A list of books there by them both, many of the Fighting Fantasy books and sorcery books. Memory of Gary Gygax, who created Dungeons and Dragons, with thanks to the following people. Special thanks for contributions, and then the contents. And the foreword by Iain Livingstone, of course, also strongly associated with computer gaming through companies such as IDOS. So, Gaming Ground Zero, finding out about Dungeons and Dragons, the name of the game, and the London location where it started, company name, brainstorming, Iain Livingstone, John Peake, Steve Jackson. Letter from on Games Workshop headed paper there, Just Games, Owl and Weasel, the early logo and the newsletter. See all those issues there. And then distributing Dungeons and Dragons. It's an early part of it. I do have that book, Dicing with Dragons, An Introduction to Role-Playing Games by Iain Livingstone. Ian's first D&D dungeon. Character sheet for Dungeons and Dragons. Games Day, where they invited people to come and play. That turned into an annual event. Games Day programs there. Memorabilia. Geneva or Bust. So convention held there. Going to the USA. The Bread Bin. Back in the UK, Steve and Ian, what they called the Bread Bin office. Early catalogue. And then on to White Dwarf. The magazine, you see, started in 1977 and gradually became larger and more professional. Artwork there. Founding Citadel Miniatures. Ryan Ansel, who co-founded Asgard and then Citadel. So I do have a couple of metal miniatures and some of the later plastic. So It's the first edition of Warhammer rules, which I do have, and some early Citadel miniatures. Building the Citadel. Some marvellous painted examples there. Used to love the painting features in White Dwarf. Then on to Warhammer itself. The mass combat fantasy role-playing game in the first edition. And there's second and then third edition. The spin-off, Warhammer 40,000. And then in bigger store, Fun of the Fair, The Empire Strikes Back, Humphrey the Dragon, some of their newer range of games there, including Talisman. I'm a big fan of Talisman. There's an early version, prototype hand-drawn by Bob Harris. Necromancer, another of the early games. First edition of Talisman, cover art by Gary Chalk. The later one by Chris Akiellos, sadly no longer with us, is the Red Dragon. I have the Judge Dredd role-playing game. I'd love to get the Doctor Who one there. And then talking about how they separated from TSR and the license, so Games Workshop opening more stores, launching more games. And then a piece on video games. So they were a computer game publisher. Here's Angus Ryle. Computer and video games catalogue. Video game section in the Sheffield shop. Eureka by Iain Livingstone, which was then actually launched by Domark. Published by Domark with a prize attached to it. Memories of Sunbeam Road. And then a warehouse. A leak. The Warlocks of Firetop Mountain. So, the commissioning letter to write the Fighting Fantasy role-playing game books. Some early mazes and designs. The Amazing World of Fighting Fantasy. I started with Death Trap Dungeon was first. There was the spin-off magazine Fighting Fantasy Warlock. Translations and other pieces there. Artwork. The Battle of the Boardroom. So, Ian and Steve, directors. There's the artwork there from second edition of Talisman. Selling up their Sunbeam Road warehouse. Acknowledgements, image credits. Miniature figure painting credits. A note on the authors, so Iain Livingstone and Steve Jackson. The index with various references to what's in there, and then we should have here, and I'll just find where it starts. Yes, so then with Unbound, you back it before it's produced, and then you get your name in the book. So let's have a look, and we should find Andrew Fisher. So those are all the backers on Unbound. And the perk I chose this time was the signed copy. And that's it. So, another fantastic production from Unbound. I'm really looking forward to reading it. So, comment below. What Games Workshop titles do you remember? Did you play the final Fighting Fantasy books? Did you play the board games like Talisman and Judge Dredd? Or did you play any of their computer games like The Amazing Chaos from Julian Gollop or Battle Cars? Like and share this video, subscribe for more Retro Shelf, for more unboxing and for gameplay videos, and stay tuned to the channel.